Do you remember, some of you undoubtedly will, what happened when you used to turn on your television set in the old days? The answer was nothing. I was thinking about this. Remember, they had tubes. And it took a while for the tubes to warm up before you got the picture. A lot of gray. Same thing with, wait, has this become a conversation? It's nice, I actually like it. Same thing with radios, remember? I don't remember this, but before transistor radios, not that old, but you had to wait for them to warm up too, right? And then there were cars. You had to start your car, and you didn't just pull out, you let the car warm up, right? And some of them had that thing called a choke. Remember a choke, right? And the purpose of the choke, by the way, for those of you who may not know, was to allow the right mixture of air and gas and oil into the carburetor. Otherwise, the car would start smoking in the back, right? But you had to do all that in the old days, which we don't do anymore. There's no need for our TV to warm up. There's no need to warm up our cars. Our computers go on instantly, and you get angry with your iPhone if somehow it causes you some consternation of a full 5 or 10 seconds. Everything is instant. That's good in some ways. But there's one thing that does need to warm up. Us. Jews. That's what the month of Elul is all about. Elul is the month that we're in. It's the month which precedes the holiest days of the year, right? We're in the month of Elul, and that's why we blow the shofar during the month of Elul as a call, if you will, a call to wake up. So as we approach the Yamim Noraim, and by the way, I so prefer that term to high holidays. Yamim Noraim means days of awe. The holidays should bring a sense of awe to us, a sense of grandiose moments which will soon occur in our lives. So the month of Elul exists to get us ready, if you will, for the high holidays. Now, I know most people may not be thinking about it. I remember one year, probably 20 years ago, it was a Kol Nidre, and I was about to give my sermon, and I said, but I know what you're thinking. Okay, Rabbi, okay, cantor, okay, choir, turn me on, make it happen. Get me in the mood. And I said, you know what? I hope that the cantor's voice really inspires you. I'm sure that it will. I hope that it was a very small choir with a very large crowd. I said, I hope that the choir, which will sing with you, will touch your heart. And if there's something that I might say that's meaningful, that would make me feel very, very good. But if you're looking for inspiration up here, I'm going to suggest you're likely to be disappointed. Let me make another suggestion. Ask yourself, 24 hours from now, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be when the shofar is blown at the end of Yom Kippur? And if you give yourself ideas of where you want to be in the next 24 hours, then I promise you, this day will be a lot more meaningful. Let's pray. It's probably the shortest sermon I ever gave. It really was. You know, the irony is I got more comments on, it's like this. So I want to share, but I don't want that to happen to you. I want to share with you, I picked three ideas that I learned from our tradition that I think will help all of us to find even more meaning when we step into synagogue at the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. The first teaching comes from the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, which we are reading right now, completing right now in the Torah cycle. Deuteronomy is often described as Moses' farewell address to the Jewish people. Place yourself in the moment. The Israelites are on the border of the Holy Land, right? They're looking across the Jordan River, and Moses, who clearly loves his people, is going to say goodbye. This is his farewell address. And this is how it begins. It says in the Torah, these are the words that Moses addressed to all Israel on the other side of the Jordan. So what does Moses do? The first thing he does is he recounts their journey where they went. And what does he speak about? He talks about how badly they acted. For example, Moses reminds them that they had come to him and asked them in advance to send scouts ahead and to scout out the cities they were going to. So Moses says, and these are his words in the Torah, I approved of the plan, so I selected 12 of your men, one from each tribe. They made for the hill country, came to the Wadi Eshkol and spied it out. They took some of the fruit of the land with them and brought it down to us. And they gave us this report. It's a good land that the Lord our God is giving us. Yet you refused to go up, and you flouted the command of the Lord. You sulked in your tents. And Moses gives example after example after example of their poor behavior. His farewell list, his farewell discussion, is a list of rebukes of the many times that our people defied God. And by the way, this wasn't even the people who did it. It was their parents. It was a new generation. So he's telling them how poorly their parents acted. Why? Why would you begin, not end, but why would you begin a farewell address like that, with that kind of a tone? I think there's something we can learn from Moses here, something that can be particularly helpful to us on the high holidays. I believe he's saying to them, by initially pointing out their faults of the past, he's saying to them, you can be better in the future. You can be a better generation than your parents. Just like a loving parent. A loving parent finds time to praise his or her children, and also a time to say, you know what? You can do a little bit better than that. That's what I think God does for us on the high holidays. Once a year, we stand before God and we spend a lot of time acknowledging what we did wrong the previous year. You all remember, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu Dofi, and we beat our chest, Al Chetchachatanu Lefanecha, for the sins which we committed. And boy, you go up and down that list. By the way, I'll tell you a story about that. When I was a kid in shul, I'd read that list in English, and I'd say, you know, I'd pick and choose. I realized, okay, I was stiff-necked, you know, I was this. Then this one called effrontery. I didn't know what the heck effrontery. I still don't know what effrontery is. But I figured I'll skip that one, and I'd pick and choose. But Mr. Schwartz, who sat 2 rows ahead of us in shul, because we sat in the same exact seats every year. They weren't assigned seats like us, but we got there early in the morning. Mr. Schwartz would be like this. And I thought, boy, I'm not doing business with this guy. You all know that, though. We beat our chest. We list all the sins which we did right, which we did wrong, right? Why? It's our tradition's way of saying, before you can move on, before you can elevate yourself, you need to honestly yet firmly acknowledge where you've gone wrong in the past year. And Moses is the loving leader of a people who reminds his people of their past with the hope that they will strive for a far better tomorrow. God is our Avinu Malkeinu. Literally, Avinu means our Father, Malkeinu, our King. Our Father reminds us, if you want perhaps parent, of our past year in the hopes that each of us will acknowledge what we did, cleanse ourselves, if you will, and strive for a better year. So the number one thing that we can think about in this month of Elul is acknowledge the areas in our past which weren't so terrific. The second teaching has to do with forgiveness. This is one of the great themes, as you know, of the Yom Kippur in particular. So what do we do? During this month of Elul, approach the people to you in your life who are closest to you, who you think you have hurt, and ask their forgiveness. And then remember to be forgiving as well. For the high holidays to have the fullest meaning, there's a few steps we need to take in advance, and I think this is one of them. Consider those in your life that you think you may have sinned against, and make a point to speak with them. First, try to repair what you've done. That's what you're supposed to do. If it involves money, then pay them back. If it involves a way that you've improperly hurt or harmed someone's reputation, then go out of your way to speak to others positively about that person. No matter what, take the time to approach the person that you've sinned against. And by the way, it's important here to be as specific as possible. You don't walk up to someone and say, listen, if I've hurt you in any way this year, please forgive me. That's not what the tradition says. The tradition says, be specific. I'm sorry for the time I did X, Y, and Z to you. I'm sorry for the time that I spoke harshly to you when we were going to go out to dinner with person X and Y, and I hope not to do it again, and I ask your forgiveness. I'll tell you, it is so, as you know, so difficult to ask forgiveness, but it is so important. Because if we're going to come before God on Yom Kippur and ask forgiveness, we can't do it until we've asked forgiveness from the people we've harmed. God, the Jewish tradition teaches, does not forgive us from hurting other people. They forgive us from hurting. They're the ones we speak to. And by the way, in that regard, it's important to be a forgiving person. The rabbis understood, by the way, that it's hard to be forgiving. So they taught, listen to this, they taught us that if we show mercy to those who hurt or offend us, if we're forgiving to others, then God will be merciful when we're offensive to God. I find that extraordinarily powerful. If we're genuinely forgiving of others, then God will be more forgiving of us. So on Yom Kippur, after we ask forgiveness from others, we're going to ask God to forgive us. If God were to say to each of us, before I forgive you, tell me when you were forgiving others, how did you respond when people asked you to forgive them? And did you take the time in advance to ask forgiveness from others? Ask forgiveness and be forgiving in the weeks leading up to the Yamim Noraim, to the days of awe. And those days will be far more meaningful. And finally, during this month of Elul, set some goals for the next year. One of the great gifts of the high holidays is that it calendars an opportunity for every single one of us to reflect on the year gone by, but also to think about our hopes for the year ahead. So I'm going to suggest that prior to Rosh Hashanah, consider this a homework assignment, but it's up to you if you want to complete it. Prior to Rosh Hashanah, take some time to think about those elements in your life that you wish to improve upon in the coming year. For example, do you wish to be more patient? Do you wish to be more charitable or more forgiving? Or spend more time studying Judaism? And even consider putting some of your aspirations on paper in the next few days, and then just prior to Erev Rosh Hashanah, read them as a reminder. Putting them down alone will be a powerful statement that you've thought about what you want for the coming year. And by the way, while you're at it, take a moment to ponder those areas in your life that have positively changed since last Yom Kippur. And take some pride. Humbly, take pride that you've improved as a human being in the prior year. The high holidays have a message for us. The message is we can change, we can become better human beings through prayer and fasting and the realization that life is not forever, and with some sense of urgency, you can change. By the way, I'll be speaking about a sense of urgency on the high holidays, and I'll be speaking about letting go of regret on the high holidays. That's unless I change the whole sermon, which I've done sometimes in the week before, but I write 20 of them. I think of 20 of them. I outline 20 of them. And then I finally, after I go crazy and drive my wife crazy, who's here with my son Daniel, ultimately come to some closure. I read a beautiful likening, if you will, of Yom Kippur to a court date. And it makes sense, by the way. It's known as Yom Hadin, the Day of Judgment. We have our day in court coming up, okay? That's how Kol Nidre starts. It's our day, it's a legalism. You're supposed to chant Kol Nidre before sundown traditionally because you can't do legalisms on Yontif. You can't do a legal transaction once the sun goes down. Once the sun goes down, it's Yontif, it's holiday. So traditional Jews will say the Kol Nidre. It is literally convening, and you'll read the words in the Machzor, we're convening a heavenly tribunal. Remember those words? It's a court. Our day in court is coming up in a few weeks. And this month of Elul reminds us it's coming, so prepare for it. So let's prepare for it. Reflect on our actions of the previous year, in particular, how we've acted to the loved ones closest to us, and then think about the parts of our lives we'd like to improve. That's what Elul is all about. And if we do that, I can almost promise that we'll enter the high holidays with a sense of optimism that will be inscribed in the book of life. And then when we hear that final shofar blast at the end of Yom Kippur, that Tekiah Gedolah, we'll feel fresh and eager to begin this new year of 5776. I want to wish each of you a Shana Tovah, a good year in every way for you and your families. May you be inscribed in the book of life for a year filled with many blessings, with goodness, filled with joy for our people and for our world. Shabbat Shalom.